This week in post, a photo teardown of sunbeams filtering through the trees. Hi everyone, my name is Scott Davenport and welcome to In Post. Thanks for joining me today. Today's video is a photo teardown. This is where I'll go through the major steps that I took processing a photo and explain some of the reasons behind why I made the set of changes that I did. Now, my style tends to be a series of small, more subtle adjustments that add up to an end result. So often there isn't a single dramatic change that happens. Although I have to say for this photo, there's one dramatic change. It's going to be right up front and it'll be incredibly obvious how different the final photo looks. And well, I'll just leave it to you to pick that out. The hint, it's the first thing we're going to do. So let's get into it here. Let's take a look at the final photo here in Lightroom. So this is from Pfeffer Beach. And if you watched In the Field, I talked about the behind the scenes of this shoot. And this was certainly my favorite photo from the set, even more so than the beach on this particular day. And I took a variety of different shots of this sunbeam. This was the best capture. Really great starburst effect with a low aperture shooting at f/16 up here. And yeah, this one just was really nice. I'm going to go through all the different snapshots here, and the very first thing is going to be the crop. And so this is kind of what the photo initially looked like. I'm going to turn off the crop for a second. So this is really the shot. And you can see this is very different. I think what I was thinking in my mind was the fence post leading in and bringing it up here, but there is so much dead space and this nasty flare that happens when you're shooting into the sun. I could clean this up, but this was just so much dead space. It didn't make sense for me to keep that. So that became a very upfront and drastic change. I usually don't crop this much on a photo, but for whatever reason, I didn't think vertically when I was in the field. But I'm going to correct that here and still have a pretty solid sized photo to work with. So the next was cleaning up the tree line. And these are all these little tiny spots of sky that are peeking through up in the trees. So if I go to that next snapshot, we'll watch those things fill in. And I went back and forth on this one. I decided to leave that one open. There's a couple of other things I could clean up, but admittedly, I started to get tired of playing with the retouch tool and just gave up on it. I did also take advantage of removing a signpost that was out here. So if I go back to the crop, you'll see there's a warning sign about surf and being careful, and then I just didn't want that in my scene. Moving on to more standard things, white balance. So I'll open up the basic panel, and we can see that I've warmed up the photo quite a bit. This was pretty monochromatic to begin with, and I wanted to have that, summer feel, nice warm orange or yellow tone. Started to do that here with adjusting the white balance. The basic adjustments, we'll start to see more details coming through in the trees, a little more contrast, the starburst gets a little crisper. These are pretty standard things, and nothing incredibly drastic, mainly contrast and clarity. So not too much going on before and after, but it's adding something. There's more dimension to the photo, there's more depth. These areas are getting darker, they're retreating. This starburst is coming through the trees a little more prominently. Then moving on to what I called selective clarity and temperature. Let's watch the upper half of the photo. There we go. This was done with a graduated filter, and if I can find the pin, there it is. It's covering the whole scene. However, I'm using a range mask, so let me press the O key to leave that on. And here's this range mask, so I'm limiting clarity and deepening shadows, not having that affect the highlights. So the starburst itself and the sky and all these areas are fundamentally blown out. I don't need to add clarity to that. Let me turn off that mask. And the result is really nice. It just adds a little more crispness to the trees, to the fence, to the ground, all of the darker toned areas of the photo. So one more time, before and after on that. So before, that selective clarity, and after. And also just notice that temperature shift. You can see I did a little more work with the temperature. And this here, this tint, is to help compensate for, there's a kind of a greenish cast in some of the areas here. And I actually do some more work on that in another step later down the line. We'll get there though. Curves is next. So we're going to see the curves really enrich things even further, amplifying the contrast. So we're going to see, if I can find my tone curve, a very gentle S curve. But before that tone curve and after that tone curve. Again, variations on a theme here. Deepening shadows, kind of keeping the highlights in check, either very subtly raising them or not touching them at all. Let's see, moving on to even more clarity in the trees. So we'll see this area here. These trees are becoming richer. This is another one of those use a graduated filter, limit the amount of clarity to just the darker tones, the mid-tones, and the shadows using those range masks. Then the fence, make the fence jump out a little bit. That was another subtle one. This was a radial filter with a little bit of masking. So if I find that radial filter, let's find that pin. There it is. So if I hover over that, we'll see that I'm limiting things to mostly the fence, letting it touch some of the darker areas there. Whoops, O key there so we can see that. But these highlight areas and some of the sand I've brushed away. The highlights are courtesy of the range mask, and then some of the little cleanup along the sand here, that's just hand brushing using the erase portion of these graduated filters. There's this brush option underneath graduated filters for either radial or standard traditional gradients. There's a brush, you have A, B, and you have erase, so you can erase things and fine-tune these graduated shapes to fit more complex shapes without having to do everything hand-painted. All right, let's turn off that mask, and then we'll go on to the vignette. So at this point, I kind of thought I was done, so I added a quite subtle vignette. I'm almost not even noticing it here as I do this one. Let's go ahead and turn off the effects and turn on. Wow, did I get my oh, I did. There it is. It's just really subtle. So it's mostly just the corners there. But from here, I still felt there was a bit of green tint coming through here, especially like right in this area there. So I did another reduction in tint. So we can see that shift there. I want you to watch kind of right in this area as I do this. Before, we can see that there's kind of a greenish color cast to this whole area. And then after, we'll see that cast disappear. That's another graduated filter just pulled down over the top, and we're doing some temperature work. And I also decided to do a little amplification of contrast again as well. That was a stylistic choice. Another stylistic choice, and the last one actually, is a split tone. And so we'll see the photo take on an even more like orange-yellow kind of cast. Oh, you know what? I think I forgot something about the green tint. I want to check this because I did make an HSL adjustment. It is here. Yes, let's close this down. Taking the yellows and shifting those more toward orange and away from green, that also helped with this cast. So in addition to there being the graduated filter, also taking the hue and shifting that more toward orange. So there really aren't greens in this photo, but yellow is that color, that boundary between orange and green, and so just kind of nudging it over toward orange to bias it away from the greens. Back to that split tone. Here's the finished product, and the split tone is very subtle, kind of like almost like a earthy clay color, and then a very dull. It's almost a plum or a purplish type color to it, but incredibly low saturation on that one. And this is more in the oranges area, but quite muted, so it has a nice subtle kiss of orange color to the scene. So one last time with the before and after, I'm going to hit the backslash key so we can see the original photo. And this is, remember that crop? We had that big crop in there, but this is out of the camera. Very monochromatic, very cool tones. And then this is after. And really my tip of the week is the crop. That was the biggest change by far to this photo, and it has nothing to do with the stylistic processing of it, but it really changed the story of the photo. Before the crop, there was a lot more going on, and there was this large amount of dead space pulling my eye away from the ultimate story, which is the starburst. taking that crop and laying it down in there really just let me focus on, this is the part of the photo that I like and I want to work on. And that's my workflow. I like to crop first and then work from there. So that will do it for this week's In Post. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, please let me know somehow. Comments on the video below. You can send questions to me through my website. And until next time, my name is Scott Davenport. Happy shooting.